Raiders of the Lost Ark wasn't just an adventure film, it was archaeology turned into mythology. Saturday matinee serials rebuilt with real sweat and broken bones. When it opened in 1981, audiences thought they were watching pure escapism, treasure hunters outrunning boulders and punching Germans across exotic landscapes, and a production that nearly collapsed under the weight of its own ambition, saved only by dysentery, improvisation, and Steven Spielberg's refusal to let spectacle overwhelm truth. These are 20 hidden details in Raiders of the Lost Ark you completely missed. Number 1. The Jungle Temple introduction wasn't designed to thrill, it was designed to teach. Indiana Jones moves through the Peruvian ruins with deliberate caution, testing stones before stepping, studying mechanisms before touching, reading the environment like a text only he can decipher. Every trap he avoids foreshadows how he'll approach danger for the rest of the film. He observes, calculates, and survives through experience rather than bravado. The boulder isn't random spectacle, it's a warning that arrogance always follows success, that taking what doesn't belong carries consequences no amount of skill can outrun. Steven Spielberg and production designer Norman Reynolds built the sequence to establish Indy's entire methodology in under 10 minutes. Harrison Ford's physical performance emphasized careful observation over reckless heroics, and that opening teaches the audience to watch him think before he acts. Number 2. Indiana Jones rarely strikes first with his whip. Throughout the entire film, the weapon functions primarily as a tool for disarming enemy, creating distance, or escaping danger rather than inflicting violence. Spielberg deliberately framed the whip as reactive rather than aggressive, reinforcing that Indy is a scholar forced into violence, not a warrior seeking it. Stunt coordinator Glenn Randall choreographed whip sequences to prioritize survival over dominance, making every crack feel like desperation instead of control. The weapon defines him as someone constantly defending himself against a world that refuses to let him study in peace. The whip becomes a symbol of his entire approach to conflict. Trouble finds him, and he improvises survival one snap at a time. Number 3. The temple is perfectly balanced before Indiana Jones arrives. Ancient mechanisms work flawlessly, traps remain dormant, and the idol sits undisturbed for centuries. The moment he takes the artifact, everything collapses. Walls crumble, spears launch, and the entire structure begins destroying itself. The film subtly suggests the artifact was never meant to be won, that removing it violates something fundamental about the space it occupied. George Lucas and Lawrence Kasdan designed the sequence to make theft feel like desecration, not discovery, and the temple punishes anyone arrogant enough to believe they deserve it. Spielberg wanted audiences to question on whether Indy's actions were heroic or destructive, whether archaeology as practiced in the film was preservation or plunder, and Indy fails it immediately, escaping only through luck, and Alfred Molina's betrayal forcing him to run faster than collapse. Number 4. Harrison Ford filmed much of Raiders of the Lost Ark with lingering injuries from previous stunts and the grueling production schedule. A back injury sustained during the minecart sequence in Temple of Doom's pre-production affected his movement throughout filming. That stiffness shaped Indiana Jones's grounded, imperfect physicality. Spielberg recognized that Ford's limited mobility made the character feel more human, less like an invincible action hero, and more like an exhausted academic surviving chaos through sheer stubbornness. Stunt coordinator Vic Armstrong doubled for Ford in the most dangerous sequences, but Ford insisted on performing enough himself that audiences could see his face during pain. Every wince, stumble, and grimace comes from genuine discomfort translated into character. He limps, sweats, and bleeds his way toward survival. Number 5. The sword fight in the Cairo marketplace was originally scripted as an elaborate duel between Indiana Jones and a skilled swordsman. Choreography was planned, rehearsals were scheduled, and the sequence was meant to showcase Indy's versatility with weapons beyond his whip. Then dysentery hit the cast, and crew filming on location in Tunisia. Ford, suffering from severe illness and unable to perform the physically demanding fight, suggested simply shooting the swordsman instead. Spielberg loved the subversion and immediately rewrote the scene on location. Terry Leonard, the swordsman actor, had spent weeks training for a fight that lasted less than 3 seconds on screen. The improvised moment became more memorable than any choreographed duel could have been, defining Indy's pragmatic approach to danger better than any scripted action sequence. Number 6. Marion Ravenwood's first scene establishes dominance in a space designed to exclude her. She runs a bar in Nepal, drinks grown men under the table, and physically knocks out a patron challenging her authority. Spielberg and screenwriter Lawrence Kasdan deliberately introduced her through violence rather than vulnerability. The film tells you immediately that she's not waiting to be rescued. Karen Allen said she played Marion as someone who never apologized for taking up space. Cinematographer Douglas Slocum framed her at eye level with every man in the bar, visually reinforcing equality before dialogue could establish it. The drinking contest and punches all happened before Indiana Jones arrived. Marion exists exists fully formed, and the film respects that independence even when later scenes force her into danger. Number 7. Indiana Jones is often dwarfed by doors, statues, and ancient architecture throughout Raiders of the Lost Ark. Cinematographer Douglas Slocum and Spielberg deliberately used wide shots emphasizing scale over heroism. The Well of Souls sequence places Indy beneath towering statues and endless darkness, visually shrinking him against forces far older than human ambition. Even the Ark itself looms larger than the men surrounding it. Spielberg wanted adventure to feel overwhelming rather than empowering, showing that Indiana Jones survives through cleverness and luck. Norman Reynolds built sets with exaggerated vertical space, creating compositions where characters occupied only the lower third of the frame. The world is always bigger than him, and that scale makes his survival feel desperate rather than triumphant. Number 8. The Germans treat the Ark of the Covenant like a weapon to be possessed. Indiana Jones treats it like a warning to be respected. That fundamental difference defines the entire conflict. The Germans believe power can be claimed through force. Indy understands that some forces cannot be controlled, only survive. Lawrence Kasdan structured the script so the Germans never question whether they should open the Ark. Arrogance blinds them to the possibility that the artifact might reject them. Ronald Lacey's portrayal of Todt and Paul Freeman's Bella both embody German entitlement. Convinced their superiority grants them immunity from ancient power. That certainty becomes their undoing when the Ark judges them no differently than anyone else foolish enough to open it. Number 9. Indiana Jones appears calm, confident, and completely in control while teaching at Marshall College. He lectures with authority and presents himself as the embodiment of academic respectability. Outside the classroom, he's reactive, exhausted, and constantly improvising survival. The contrast shows how much of his professional life is performance. Spielberg deliberately structured the film to present two versions of the same man. Harrison Ford said playing those contradictions required finding vulnerability beneath the confidence. Costume designer Deborah Nadoolman dressed him in tweed and glasses for the college scenes, visually separating the professor from the fedora-wearing adventurer. The students swooning over him don't know the man who runs from boulders and barely survives tomb collapses. The classroom is a lie he tells himself about control. Number 10. When Indiana Jones loses his fedora, he's vulnerable. When he retrieves it, he regains control. The hat isn't just style, it's identity. Spielberg and costume designer Deborah Nadoolman used the fedora as a visual marker of Indy's psychological state throughout the film. Every time the hat falls, danger escalates. Every time he reclaims it, order temporarily restores itself. The opening sequence in Peru establishes the pattern when Indy reaches back through closing stone doors to grab the fedora before escaping. Survival matters less than retrieving the hat. Harrison Ford said the hat became a physical anchor during chaotic stunt sequences. The film teaches audiences to watch the fedora, recognizing that as long as Indy wears it, he remains himself. Number 11. Marion Ravenwood is never visually subordinated to Indiana Jones. Even in danger, Douglas Slocum and Spielberg compose shots placing her at equal height with every male character. The camera doesn't look down at her or position her as smaller or weaker. That framing was a quiet rebellion against adventure film conventions that typically diminish female characters through visual language. Karen Allen said Spielberg directed her to stand her ground physically in every scene, to occupy space without apology. The camera respected that direction. During the truck chase, Marion drives with the same determination as Indy fights. Editor Michael Kahn cut between them without visual hierarchy, showing two people fighting for survival rather than a hero rescuing a damsel. That equality lives in the editing and cinematography. Number 12. Every opening of the Ark of the Covenant leads to death, chaos, or blindness. The audience never sees its true power used constructively. Mystery is preserved through restraint. Spielberg deliberately avoided showing what the Ark actually contains, letting biblical wrath define it instead of concrete imagery. The German opening becomes spectacle, fire, and melting faces, but the film never explains the source of that power. George Lucas and Lawrence Kasdan wanted the artifact to remain unknowable, beyond human comprehension. Special effects supervisor Richard Edlin created the opening sequence using practical effects, rotoscoped animation, and careful editing to suggest power too vast to be framed completely. The camera pulls back and lets destruction happen at a distance that preserves awe. By never showing the Ark safely opened, the film maintains that some knowledge is forbidden. Number 13. Indiana Jones's fear of snakes undercuts the mythic hero image the film constructs around him. The phobia isn't played purely for comedy. It's a deliberate character flaw reminding audiences he's not fearless, just committed enough to push through terror when necessary. Spielberg wanted Indy to have a vulnerability that couldn't be overcome through skill or intelligence. Harrison Ford played the fear as genuine revulsion, not exaggerated panic, making the moments feel authentic. The Well of Souls sequence forces Indy to confront thousands of snakes, turning his greatest fear into an inescapable environment. Marion's relative calm compared to his visible distress emphasizes that courage isn't the absence of fear. Kasdan wrote the snake phobia to humanize Indy, to give him something he couldn't whip or shoot his way past. Number 14. The airplane propeller fight uses the same visual language as the opening boulder sequence. Circular motion dominates both scenes with escalating danger and no clear escape. The camera tracks rotation, whether it's a massive stone sphere or spinning blades, creating visual rhymes that tie the film's action together. Spielberg and editor Michael Kahn deliberately structured set pieces to echo each other. Stunt coordinator Vic Armstrong choreographed the propeller fight to feel inevitable, with Indy and the German mechanic pulled into the plane's rotation like gravity. The framing emphasizes entrapment rather than heroism, showing two men caught in machinery neither can control. Just like the boulder, the propeller doesn't care about motivation. Indiana Jones never outgrows the chaos, he survives it through luck and desperation, not skill. Number 15. The Germans lose not because they lack power, but because they believe in power without humility. They approach the Ark as conquerors, certain their superiority grants them immunity from divine consequence. Indiana Jones survives because he knows when not to look, when to surrender control, and accept that some forces cannot be dominated. That distinction defines the film's entire moral structure. Paul Freeman's Belloc represents the ultimate believer, an archaeologist who abandoned scholarship for power, convinced his knowledge makes him worthy of the Ark's secrets. His final speech before opening the Ark reveals absolute certainty and complete arrogance. That certainty kills him. Spielberg wanted the ending to punish belief in human exceptionalism, showing that ancient power doesn't care about ideology. The Germans die screaming because they never considered they might be unworthy. Number 16. The Ark is boxed, labeled, and buried in a government warehouse among thousands of identical crates. Indiana Jones's adventure changes nothing on a global scale. The artifact he risked his life to recover disappears into bureaucratic obscurity. Spielberg and Lawrence Kasdan deliberately structured the ending to mock the idea of heroic legacy, showing that even successful adventures become footnotes erased by institutional indifference. The government thanks Indy and Marion politely, then ensures the Ark will never see daylight. Douglas Slocum shot the warehouse with forced perspective, making the space appear infinite. George Lucas wanted the ending to feel unsatisfying, to deny audiences the triumphant closure adventure films typically provide. Indy saved the world from German possession of ultimate power, but the world will never know. Number 17. The final warehouse image reveals infinite boxes stretching into darkness, each one containing secrets the government chose to bury. This isn't just bureaucratic incompetence, it's systematic erasure of knowledge. Spielberg framed the shot to feel like a horror reveal, showing that the real danger isn't supernatural artifacts, but institutional power deciding what humanity is allowed to know. Norman Reynolds built the warehouse set using forced perspective and matte paintings, creating the illusion of endless rows disappearing into shadow. The Ark becomes one lost item among countless others, each crate potentially containing world-changing discoveries left to rot. Michael Kahn held the final shot longer than comfortable, letting the implications settle as the camera slowly pulls back. No resolution, no closure, just the quiet horror of knowledge deliberately forgotten. Number 18. Indiana Jones survives, but he doesn't conquer. The Ark isn't claimed, studied, or destroyed by him. His actions change outcomes but don't control them. Spielberg deliberately avoided giving Indy a traditional victory, instead showing him as a witness to forces far beyond his influence. The Ark judges everyone equally, and Indy's survival comes from humility rather than heroism. He doesn't defeat the Germans through superior fighting. He closes his eyes and lets divine power do what he cannot. Lawrence Kasdan structured the script to deny Indy agency at the climax, forcing him into passivity as the ultimate act of wisdom. Marcus Brody warns early in the film that the Ark is not meant to be found. Indy walks away with nothing but his life, and the film frames that as the only victory that matters. Number 19. Each set piece in Raiders of the Lost Ark resets the stakes without offering sustained safety. The structure deliberately mirrors 1930s adventure films that George Lucas and Steven Spielberg grew up watching, where cliffhangers propelled narratives forward through momentum rather than plotting. There's no safe midpoint where characters regroup. Every location brings immediate danger. The Jungle Temple, the Cairo Marketplace, the Well of Souls, each sequence begins with new threats ignoring previous victories. Michael Kahn cut the film to maintain relentless pacing, rarely allowing audiences to breathe between between action beats. That rhythm came directly from films like Don Winslow of the Navy and Spy Smasher. Spielberg said the goal was to make audiences feel like they were watching 5 cliffhanger episodes condensed into one film. The story moves forward because it never stops moving. Number 20. Germans, soldiers, bystanders, and archaeologists all face the same consequences when the Ark opens. Power doesn't discriminate. Consequence does. The Ark destroys everyone who witnesses its opening, except those who show humility by looking away. Spielberg wanted the climax to emphasize that divine power operates outside human moral frameworks. The Germans aren't punished for being evil. They're punished for arrogance, for believing they deserved access to forces beyond human comprehension. Belloc passes not because he's corrupt, but because he looked. The film suggests the Ark isn't good or evil, it simply is. Industrial light and magic created the face-melting effects using practical makeup and animation, making the deaths feel visceral. George Lucas and Lawrence Kasdan structured the ending to deny moral simplicity, showing that the Ark's judgment is final and utterly indifferent to human categories of deserving. Decades later, Raiders of the Lost Ark still works because it never pretended heroism was clean or simple. The hidden details reveal a world where curiosity is dangerous, survival is temporary, and institutional power buries truth more effectively than any ancient curse. From improvised solutions born of dysentery to visual language that frames heroes as small and fragile, the film built adventure on foundations of humility and restraint. Indiana Jones doesn't conquer the unknown, he survives it, barely, and walks away knowing some mysteries are meant to stay buried, because sometimes the greatest treasure is recognizing when to stop digging.